And we are still getting a couple more people logging on, and I can see them in the waiting room. So we're just going to give people a couple, maybe a minute or two more to get logged on, and then we will start shortly. Thank you. Perfect. So I figured let's go ahead and get started. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our community conversation on the Spokane Valley Transit update in partnership with the City of Spokane Valley and Spokane Transit Authority. My name is Lizette Garby. I'm the Director of Community Engagement and Policy here at the Greater Spokane Valley Chamber of Commerce. Today, we will be receiving an update by STA on the I-90 Valley Corridor High Performance Transit Project. This project aims to support the growth and economic vitality of our region by improving our mobility on the busiest corridor, which includes Spokane Valley and through Liberty Lake as well. I'd like to introduce Carl Ostrom, who's the Director of Planning, and Hamid Hajafari, Senior Transit Planner from the Spokane Transit Authority, to lead us through this presentation. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to you.
Thanks, Lisette, and good afternoon, everyone. We appreciate you joining us for this conversation. So we just wanted to go through a presentation. Next slide has an outline of our meeting. Lisette began our introductions, and then we'll present, and then we hope to take your questions at the end of the meeting. So if you have a question, at any time, please feel free to place it in the chat, and then know that as we get to the end of the meeting, we'll go through each of those questions, as well as some questions Lisette has for us. And so next slide just has our titles here, and again, we're really pleased to be here with you today. So I'm going to give you some project background before I hand it off to Hamid for the next part of this. So next slide, please. And then one more. So as Lisette mentioned, this is a project, a study, a planning effort related to the I-90, what we call the I-90 Valley Corridor, which is busiest traffic road, Interstate 90, and also a transit corridor, and specifically a high performance transit corridor as envisioned by STA as part of its long range plan. In 2016, regional voters approved a ballot measure funding more and better transit. And as part of that measure, there was a plan called STA Moving Forward. And that plan calls for 6 high performance transit corridors to have varying levels of investment in terms of service quality, frequency, and amenities to come together as something that's higher than conventional bus service, something we call high performance transit. In the I-90 Valley Corridor specifically, we envisioned a number of investments to support this corridor, albeit really a beginning of what could exist in the I-90 Valley Corridor. This included a new transit center, expanded commuter parking east of Sullivan Road, so looking eastern edge of Spokane Valley or into Liberty Lake, new direct nonstop peak hour service between Liberty Lake and Spokane, night and weekend service along this corridor. Today, there is no bus service that runs after 9 p.m. along I-90 or on the weekends. And then extend service to Post Falls and Coeur d'Alene on a 2-year pilot basis through a cross-state partnership. Next slide, please. So there are other elements that we've identified in our planning efforts that could be included in the I-90 Valley Corridor. Could be other high-performance transit stations or enhanced stops. There could be, and as part of our planning effort, identifying a overall service architecture, a potential Argonne Road Flyer Station on Park and Ride, future facilities in Kootenai County, and a redesign of local bus routes to support the overall connection. And thank you for those who just joined us. If you don't mind muting, unless you'd like to make the presentation, but otherwise we'll wait till the end when we have some Q&A time. Thank you. So we currently have just under $14.5 million programmed for these investments, including a $7.5 million state grant through the Washington State Department of Transportation Regional Mobility Program, $1.84 million in federal funds, both secured as well as planned, and then just over $5 million in local funds. The improvements will include design, engineering, right-of-way acquisition, and construction of major transit facilities and infrastructure. And these ultimately, these improvements will benefit a significant number of Spokane County residents and employees who commute both in Spokane County as well as to and from Spokane County and Kootenai County. Next slide, please. So this planning process that we have been undertaking is a first step in a multi-layer approach for developing and investing in the corridor within the time frame of STA moving forward, which basically is through 2026. The corridor development planning process began in 2021, and we have been analyzing and evaluating service infrastructure, taking in public feedback, developing a plan, and developing cost estimates and scope for other elements. And later this year, we expect to begin design and engineering of proposed improvements, and that'll continue into 2024 with the objective of beginning construction on some items as early as late 2023 and into 2025. Next slide, please. So this effort, we call the corridor development plan phase of this, is ultimately developing a plan that is, its objectives are to define service architecture to meet a variety of transportation needs, identify candidate and preferred locations of new stations and corridor infrastructure, to provide a roadmap for planned and possible future phases of corridor build out, and ultimately to support the planning efforts objectives to support economic vitality, advance transportation equity, promote integrated solutions, engage our community, to model regional cooperation and enhance community identity and environment. Next slide. The timeline for these activities, as I mentioned, it began through this planning effort began in 2021 and included developing baseline conditions, which my colleague Hamid Jafari will share in a few moments, developing concepts and analyzing those and evaluating those concepts to bring forth to the public. So if we move on, I'll turn it over to Hamid.
Sure. Thanks everyone for your time. We are honored to be here and presenting the result of the corridor development plan. So next slide, please. So in the first stage, we have like a analysis of the current situations, both in terms of housing and land use, and also in terms of traffic. So the result shows that the highest volume of traffic is between Spokane downtown and Spokane Valley, and also in east of Spokane Valley to Liberty Lake, we also see a high traffic congestion. Next slide, please. So to be just summaries of our results of analysis, we see a rapid growth all over the corridor, and especially in Liberty Lake, we are experiencing fastest percentage of growth, both in terms of jobs and housing. And also East Valley area contains a substantial number of jobs and becoming a transit trip generator. And also in Kootenai County, that is also it's going to be a part of this project. It's the fastest growing metropolitan area in the US. And also we make a comparison between 2015 data and also a prediction for 2045, and it shows that the daily and peak traffic is going to increase in the corridor, and the hotspot of this congestion will be Hamilton Street to Thor and Freya, S-curves near Sprague Interchange, Sullivan Road Interchange to Harvard Interchange, and the RAM terminals in Spokane downtown, and also Pines and Liberty Lake. And also in terms of interstate commute, we see that the growth of the cross commute that I'm going to explain more in the next slide. So because of the different regulations between Washington State and Idaho State, there are residents that work in Spokane County and work in Kootenai County and vice versa. And we have over 10,000 residents of Kootenai County that travel daily to Spokane County, and they make up around 5% of Spokane County's total workforce. And on the other hand, we have 5,000 Spokane County residents that they also commute to Kootenai County for work, and they make up around 7% of Kootenai County's total workforce. And these commuters actually add more congestion to the corridor. Next slide, please. And we also have long-term and 10 years of comparison of Kootenai County and Spokane County commuters, and we consider the period of 2009 and 2018 because 2018 is the latest data that's available for interstate commuting, and it shows that in both sides we have a constant increase during this time, and especially Spokane County employees who lived in Kootenai County, they have around 56% increase in 10 years, and Kootenai County employees who lives in Spokane County shows more than 100% increase. And we predict that this trend will continue, and we have more interstate commuters, and this shows the needs to improve the transit during this along this corridor. Next slide, please. And Carl is going to explain about the scenario development that we consider for this project.
Thank you, Hamid. And I just wanted to again welcome all those who have joined us today since the beginning of the presentation. We will be having a Q&A session at the end if you want to hold your questions until then, or if you want to type it out into chat. Either way, that's great, and we'll take it at the end of the presentation. And so as part of this planning effort, we need to identify, well, what exactly would high performance transit look like in this corridor? And because there are multiple locations of our existing facilities and potential new facilities, as well as a variety of job centers and housing centers along the corridor, there isn't really a one size fits all approach that it's kind of obvious what it is without some extra due diligence. And so as part of that planning effort, we developed another number of, or identified and defined a number, excuse me, of building blocks, as well as evaluation metrics and objectives. And we developed several scenarios, actually, I think it was 14 in total. And we looked at those scenarios and compared it against a preliminary set of screening criteria and did a scoring process to shortlist those scenarios to about 4 different scenarios. Meanwhile, one of the key elements of any planning activities along I-90 at this point is, where are you going to put things? Where is there land available? Where is it prospectively available if through acquisitions? And what are those needs? And so really looking at those 2 items together, we developed one scenario that actually rose above the others, and we call our preferred architecture. But even than that, there's variations based on where parcels could be made available or acquired that create 3 different alternatives as part of that scenario. Next slide, please. This map represents that preferred architecture for high performance transit. And so this shows, just to orient you, you see in the bottom left, in the right-hand side, you see the I-90 shield. And so I-90 runs east-west here, and then you see the Spokane River. And then there are some very kind of caricature cities, just kind of blocky, showing Spokane, Millwood, Spokane Valley, Liberty Lake, Post Falls, and Coeur d'Alene, and some major intersecting streets. Then before we get into the colored lines, note the shaded areas, kind of the darker yellow areas or almost brown areas that represent potential facility locations, areas that we looked at into higher level to explore what properties available, how a new transit line could connect to those properties. And so from Argonne, and then in the area of Pines Road, and you see that as a large circle really extending all the way to Evergreen, almost to Sullivan. Then as oblong circle by or oval by Barker Road in the Green Acres area, then out to State Line, Post Falls, and Coeur d'Alene. So then we identified in that preferred scenario, again, there were about 13 other scenarios we looked at, and we screened out those others, a system rather than one route, one bus route that could accomplish everything, because we don't have a dedicated grade separated corridor. We have to look at how do we connect places and make sure we still provide enough speed for the customer and give them to the places they'd like to travel to. So this actually represents, there's 3 main corridors here. The primary corridor would actually run starting on the east from Liberty Lake to our facility in the Mirabeau area, a new facility at Argonne Road, serve downtown Spokane, and then continue to Spokane Airport. So that is a new element here that as we've actually long envisioned some type of connectivity from the airport to the valley, but this became part of the scenario. And that actually extends to our new West Plains Transit Center, opened about 3.5 years ago, just southwest of the Amazon facility on Geiger Boulevard. That is envisioned to be the primary corridor in this these set of routes. The next one, the blue line starting at State Line, would continue, and this map is a little bit deceptive. It makes it appear like it would be on I-90, but it would actually serve local stops through Liberty Lake on Appleway Boulevard, and then continue to Green Acres area to a new transit facility, and then Travel Express all the way to downtown Spokane. And then not just stopping at the STA Plaza, but instead this would travel north to the North Bank, the area that's the name of the area around where the arena, the new podium is located, and the upcoming soccer stadium or football stadium that is being built by the public schools. This would also serve the county campus. from those destinations. And a third line in red would be from that same Green Acres area to along Sprague Avenue, and then Express once it gets to Sprague at this I-90, and then continue to the University District. And so instead of everything just serving downtown, you have a variety of connections that are served in an express manner into downtown. There's also shown on this map a dashed green line, and that represents the connection to Coeur d'Alene. As I mentioned earlier, ST moving forward contemplates that as a pilot service or a near-term a test, if you will, of that connectivity. And one thing we know from that data that Hamid shared earlier about cross-state travel, a lot of that commuter traffic is actually between Liberty Lake, Spokane Valley areas to Coeur d'Alene and Post Falls. While there are obviously commuters heading to downtown Spokane or the airport, this connection really is catered to the connection to those people working in the valley or living in the valley, going to jobs. And this provides some efficiency in the route. It still allows people coming from Coeur d'Alene, they can connect at Mirabou and travel with just transferring to one bus to the airport. The next slide, please. So I have here the alternatives. So based on that preferred scenario, we built 3 alternatives. So A, B, and C. And A and B both contemplate taking our existing Mirabou Park and Ride and expanding it to serve as a transit center. In the alternative A, it couples that with a new transit center or park facility near in the Green Acres area and near Barker Road. Alternative B takes that as a new Liberty Lake facility closer to Harvard Road. And then finally, alternative C actually looks at expanding facilities south of I-90, and so in the Mirabou area, but potentially along Mission Avenue, closer to McDonald Road. And that would be coupled with that Green Acres Transit Center included in A. So kind of mixing and matching to see how these evaluate based on our metrics. Next slide, please. And so we had a variety of evaluation metrics, a whole very big spreadsheet of them, but they came down to, they were measured by a variety of data, including the region, SRTC, the Spokane Regional Transportation Council, has a regional travel demand model that predicts traffic volumes and impacts of different developments and different road projects and transit projects. And so part of our work was to use that model to evaluate ridership and the overall effect of this on the network. We also looked at geographic information systems, GIS, to evaluate work access, how many jobs could be accessible to this, how many houses and people, the travel time along the corridor, so actually looking at where transit stations could be located and how many minutes would it take in the future, projected on future traffic volumes and the placement of transit, how quickly could someone get from one point to another, and then looked at a variety of demographic information based on the US Census data, and also just looked at preliminary estimates for capital and operating costs. Next slide, please. So this is a roll up. So like I said, it actually is a very long spreadsheet of various quantitative and some qualitative metrics and results. But this is the roll up of the major 6 categories. And so the baseline scenario is looking at, well, if we did nothing in this corridor over what's planned in this year, how would it perform against transportation, economic development, social and community factors, environment, financial impacts, and deliverability? And so those rectangles that are green were higher performing against these metrics. Moderate performing are in yellow, and red being lower performing. Red doesn't mean it's bad, it's just that it's lower performing. So it's something to keep in mind. Some of these actually were very close, but there were distinct differentials, and so we did represent that here. If you look at this high level, you see the alternative A has the fewest number of, well, has no red lower performing. It is the higher performing of the 3 alternatives. outside of the baseline scenario. Of course, the baseline scenario provided the best when it came to financial because there was no new investments, but the alternative A had a strongest ridership. I have some the next slide covers some of the major findings through this evaluation effort. We can go to that. So all alternatives appeared to result in a multifold increase in ridership in the corridor compared to the 2045 baseline. That's in excess of 100%. So one of the key elements here is we invest in transit in this corridor, we see ridership increase. And so transit, when it's more frequent, makes it easier to ride because essentially you reduce the wait time and the ability for people to be spontaneous or for the trip, the schedules to meet up with their individual needs. We also saw that it validated the preferred architecture, including the connectivity to the West Plains. When we looked at the different, A versus B in terms of a placement of a park and ride, either in the Barker Road area or Harvard Road area, the Barker Road was by far more successful. Harvard Road does have a park and ride in that general vicinity. And so we did see that that was a clear finding. Also, Marabou Park and Ride. So while earlier in our study, we looked at, are there other locations to replace this? It became clear that there was network improvement capabilities that exist because of that park and ride being located between Evergreen and Pines Road along Indiana. We are landlocked there, being on the side of the railroad tracks away from all the housing. So if there are opportunities in the future to expand that, great. Even if there are some things near term we could do to increase the capacity and the functionality for passengers and buses. We also saw a real strong response for a park and ride or connectivity at Argonne Road. We actually looked at just providing the connectivity, even without parking for commuters, creates a tremendous amount of ridership, both from people who are walking. There's many jobs within walking distance of Argonne on I-90, but also people who are transferring between bus routes there. So I just have a couple images here, next slide, showing what these changes could look like. So this is at Marabou Park and Ride between Evergreen and Pines Roads. And it's depicting the west half of it in the large site plan on top. We currently have a bus layover and a passenger loading area on site. What this proposes to do is expand that capacity to meet closer to what we envision as a transit center these days, providing both buses boarding and a center platform with those two kind of golden rectangles on it. That's the main passenger platform. And then buses that are simply load and go, going to downtown Spokane would be curbside. And those, it actually depicts two different buses there with those blue rectangles for shelters. And then the bicycle lane would be preserved to go around those shelters. And then we basically maximize the existing parking lot that STA has by expanding it westward to our parcel line, and then extending sidewalk along Indiana all the way to where it ends west of Pines Road, just improving overall connectivity. And so these upgrades would be envisioned to bring the park and ride up to more of a transit center level of infrastructure in terms of capacity for our customers and for our operations. Next slide, please. This depicts a new park and ride or transit center in the Green Acres area. So it's actually in this concept located within the city of Liberty Lake, just east of Barker Road near the Green Acres exit that ties into Appleway Boulevard or Appleway Avenue. What's depicted here is over 400 car parks. We'd likely start smaller than that, but this park and ride would have that dark pavement is the bus loop there with the arrows. So those are where the buses would load, they would stage, and then those passenger waiting areas and restrooms are depicted in those rectangles, kind of going at an angle. And then what is also depicted here are some bold concepts for connectivity to I-90. So coming from Spokane or Spokane Valley, buses heading east actually would exit at Barker Road and then have a transit-only exit off of the on-ramp from eastbound to I-90 into the facility. And that's something we envision could take place sooner than later. In the westbound direction, probably a longer term play here would be a connection that flies over I-90 on a new on-ramp bridge for buses only coming from this transit facility westbound and then merges onto I-90 before the exit to Barker Road. So these are two of the main concepts, and they correspond to concepts in STA moving forward. I'm going to turn it back over to Hamid, and I'll talk later about how all these things tie into the corridor development plan. And Hamid will speak to our public outreach. If you want to go to the next slide.
Thanks, Carl. Sure. So next slide, please. From the beginning of this project, we start to involve our public and our local agency in the process of the corridor development planning. And because we believe that beside socially and economically sustainable, we need to create and design transit routes that are socially also sustainable, and most people can benefit from that. So in the first step, we created a technical advisory committee that include the planners and engineers from all the local agency along the corridor, include the WashDOT, SRTC, City of Spokane, City of Spokane Valley, Spokane County, City of Liberty Lake, and City of Millwood. And 3 committee meetings we had over the past year, along with various agency-specific meetings. And also during February and March of 2022, we have presentation for the elected officials of Liberty Lake, Spokane County, City of Spokane, City of Spokane Valley, and City of Millwood. And we informed them about the process of our project. And also on March 1st, we have our first online open house, and we use different social media platforms, and also using local newspaper and also advertisements through our buses and our bus stations to inform people about that. And also in March 2022, we released our first survey, and we have over 450 survey respondents. And also we presented to Valley Kovanis on March 29th, and we released our second online survey, and it's currently available. You can go through the project webpage and take the survey. And today we have our second public open house. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, we have in March, we had the first public survey, and over 450 respondents actually attended in the survey. And the social demographic analysis of the respondents show that they are a good representative of the population in both Spokane County and Kootenai County. And in terms of result, and I'm going to emphasize that this is just result of the respondent of that survey, but there is a general support of additional transit investment. And on the top of the list for future investment, there is night and weekend services and improved frequency that are desirable improvements for respondents. Around 77% of respondents from Spokane County, they approved the extension of the bus services to Kootenai County, and also 41% of the Kootenai County residents approved this extension. And overall, we have 75% approval rate. And State Line, Sprague, and Argonne were identified as the top preferred interchanges for the new park and ride location, and also a strong interest in exploring ways to ensure investment support connectivity to jobs and destination in area more broadly defined than the I-90 corridor. Next slide, please.
So I'll speak quickly to the draft corridor development plan. And so as I've mentioned earlier, this whole effort is being compiled or represented into a corridor development plan. It's currently in draft and it's available on our website. We'll have a link here in a little bit. And ultimately, it outlines the goals and objectives for the I-90 Valley High Performance Transit Corridor and includes recommended improvements. Those include addressing the projects within STU moving forward, as well as identifying other future service and capital improvements along the corridor, and it documents our evaluation processes and public outreach efforts. Next slide. So again, earlier in my presentation, I introduced the different elements of STU moving forward that are specific to this corridor. And in the corridor development plan, we've responded to those and identified basically how they would be implemented. So the first one, introducing more nights and weekend service along I-90. And so existing Route 74 ultimately will be renumbered and be that core route, and back to that original map, the purple route, and what we call Route 7, and will be that primary corridor and have night and weekend service. It will travel ultimately all the way to the West Plains Transit Center and the airport. Expanding the commuter parking capacity east of Sullivan Road. We have a preferred location there in the vicinity of the Green Acres interchange in Liberty Lake. But the facility could be located anywhere between that interchange and Barker Road. New direct nonstop peak hour service between Liberty Lake and Spokane. We recommend modifying and expanding our existing peak service between Liberty Lake and Spokane, but I'll actually inserting in that pattern of travel this new Green Acres facility before traveling express to Spokane. And then we called for a new Miraboo Transit Center in STU moving forward. And we recommend now, rather than a new facility altogether, that this actually be the existing park and ride and be expanded in its capacity to service transit center. And then as a cross-state partnership, the creation of an extension of high performance transit to Post Falls and Coeur d'Alene on a 2-year basis, pilot basis. We envision a connection that to be compatible with this overall architecture that serves between Miraboo as a transit center to Coeur d'Alene. Again, that dashed green line that I showed earlier in the presentation. Next slide. Now, as alluded to earlier, there are other elements of our planning effort that are above and beyond STM moving forward. And so some of these things we may find funding opportunities in the near term, or we may continue to study and continue to collaborate with our partners in the city of Spokane Valley and Liberty Lake and the State Department of Transportation, among others. So these other recommended investments include advancing an Argonne Station park and ride. So this is actually something we are currently pursuing along this corridor, subject to a state grant that could be secured for that. Pursue opportunities to expand Miraboo with transit and development opportunities north of the railroad tracks. So as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the housing in that area is across the tracks. And is there a way to better improve the pedestrian environment to get people to transit, but also provide a capacity increase for transit on the north side of the tracks? Expand the span of express service, working toward more all-day service on more than one route along I-90. Work with WashDOT and local agencies to create transit priorities pathways in the corridor. So that's another long-term item, is how do we make sure that the bus really is a preferred mode of travel in this corridor, because it can get you away from a lot of the traffic. Of course, even if we are in traffic, I would submit to you that there is a benefit in being a bus rider, as you don't have to personally deal with the aggravation of traffic. You can read on your phone or your smart device, or just look out the window, enjoy the view. That new park and ride in the Barker or Greenacre Roads area could be expanded to have greater capacity long term. So as I mentioned, the concept I shared was about 400 car parks. SGM moving forward projects more like 300 near term. So that could be a smaller site that expands for the future. Then I mentioned earlier in our study, we did look at Mission Avenue as a potential location for a transit center. While this is not part of that core recommendations as part of SDM moving forward, we think there is still value in pursuing transit investments along Mission Avenue, which may include some type of transit hub in the future. And then as we look further to the east, State Line as a facility within Washington State, and it's currently beyond STA's municipal boundaries, if you will, our district boundaries. There is property owned by WashDOT, and it provides a nice, really an anchor point for express service, where we could basically remove that traffic from the lanes of travel on the freeway and put them onto buses, put passengers on the buses. So those are all longer term concepts. And as I mentioned, we are pursuing grant opportunities to move forward with Argonne Station Park and Ride if possible, but these others we would continue to pursue in future grant opportunities or investment programs, and then also through policy changes as we work with WashDOT and others to really ensure that transit has the ability to operate effectively through this corridor. So that is the end of our presentation, and we just want to move to the last slide, Lisette. I just want to conclude before we go to, I do have next steps. I apologize, sorry, I got ahead of myself. Hamid has a few next steps before we go to the end of our presentation.
Sure. So now draft corridor development plan is available on the project webpage, and during this corridor development planning, we keep updating our webpage with our progress. So, and we are going to continue to do that. So you're always welcome to look at our webpage and be aware of our new progress. So online survey also is available until June 22nd. And after that, we are going to collect our survey result and analyze them. And then public hearing scheduled for June 16 at the SCA board meeting, and then finalized plan for the board action in July. And at the end, we are going to advance SCA moving forward project for design and property acquisition. So how to get involved, just check the webpage regularly, and also for the public hearing, there is like a link on the webpage. You can look at that on June 16, and here is also the link for the an address for the survey, and also you can use this QR code if you want to directly get to the survey. And we are looking forward to hear your feedback. Thanks.
Thank you so much. That was very informative and overall a great presentation. I'm going to go ahead and open it up and see if there's anybody who has any questions. Please feel free to either use the raise your hand feature on Zoom, or go ahead and type into the chat box. But as we give people a couple of times, can you guys go into kind of in what ways does this project help the residents of the region overall in the greater Spokane Valley?
Yeah, I'll start, and Hamid might want to add something. So this overall corridor, Spokane Valley, is growing quickly, not just inside the city limits, but also the cities around it and unincorporated areas. And as we think about transit connectivity, So many other regional destinations are outside of the city, whether that's the airport, Eastern Washington University, or jobs and other amenities in Spokane. And so that those connections and finding quicker ways to get from place to place are really important. For bus riders today, many of them, the routes that they rely on a day-to-day basis, often are routes that are traveling on local arterials and don't take advantage of the freeway system, as partly because there's not always the facilities for them, or there hasn't been that investment in that service. And so investing more in service that's traveling at a faster rate of speed and is connecting these people directly to those locations. And so having those regional connections, as well as helping people just travel within the valley in new ways that don't exist today quickly. For instance, Argonne Road, we don't have a park and ride there, and so being able to get from there to, say, Liberty Lake quickly today is very difficult, and so it takes at least one transfer, if not two. And so if we're able to speed that up with a bus that connects them all with new facilities, is really important to the customer who rides the bus today, but also those who are looking to ride, especially with gas prices sky high.
And then I think you touched a little bit, Carl, on overall economic development and how, you know, this really connects people from key places. I mean, how do you see this moving forward and being, you know, a benefit for businesses?
For sure. So one of the things when we think about the businesses, it's not just those that would be located adjacent to a transit station or transit center, but also those who may be connected by routes that intersect those new transit stations and centers. And so as we think about the job growth, especially in Northeast Spokane Valley, we are planning for new bus service as early as this fall to our Barker Road. And then in this overall network, part of what's happening, we have this preferred architecture. There's actually bus route changes that are contemplated at the same time. And in conjunction with other investments Spokane Valley is making for railroad crossings, especially Pines Road, where we could see making connections to better serve jobs north of Marabou, park and ride today along Mansfield, and then up through the Trentwood area, and then down in the Barker Road area, so we connect a lot more jobs by having these strong anchor points. Without those strong anchor points, we don't have anything to bring people to, or they're taking a slower bus route that has to connect them, you know, into Spokane, and makes it less attractive, and so therefore less effective to provide that service. And so we are looking for that connectivity, basically branching out from this high performance transit corridor.
Absolutely. How about businesses that are not located along I-90 and that main corridor? I mean, how would this be beneficial to them, or what are kind of next steps or things you guys are looking at?
Yeah, I think one element of that is simply finding more ways for other people to get around, helps everybody with traffic flow. So we don't necessarily always see traffic abate. What we see is the effective capacity of the freeway is increased because there are people who are now taking advantage of transit more often. And so the region's going to grow. It's kind of traffic is part of the reality of that. But if more people can take transit, it makes it easier for those who are still traveling by cars, if they can't avail themselves of that service, to travel and get to their jobs effectively. Obviously, that's a key ingredient for various businesses and contractors who obviously can't ride the bus because they've got their tools and their machinery has to travel by truck or other vehicle, by van. And so making sure there's capacity in the roadway for those travelers. And then also, again, overall that connectivity branching out on other routes STA provides that make connections to the I-90 Valley corridor.
And I think you talked a little bit, you know, really great on the connectivity overall, but how would this project really help improve public safety?
Amit, do you want to take that up?
Sure. So in terms of public safety, also the data shows that around 1/3 of the deadly accidents in the corridor are the ones that at least one of the drivers were under influence. And especially this corridor is connecting two states that that have different regulations. For instance, like in terms of like weed, they have different regulation, and it caused by maybe some people travel for these purposes, and also different other like parties and stuff that people use this transit, this corridor, and creating a reliable services that will be available at nights, and people don't have to drive when they are not in a good also like situation. And also we have a good number of retirees that moving to this area, and they some of them lives in the other part of the corridor and in the Corridor lane, and they need to come to a Spokane area using the healthcare services. And having this reliable and fast services is going to help a lot of people to use the non-driving modes, and as a result increase the safety for them and also for other people that driving the highway.
Thanks, Hamid.
Sure.
Couple more questions, sorry. How did you reflect public opinion in this? I know you had your first survey open and now you're on your second one, but how did that reflect in part of this planning?
I'll start and Hamid can add. One of the things that is reflective is Argonne Road. One of the reasons we are planning to submit a grant application really is there was strong interest, especially in our first survey, that was identified as one of the key nodes to add to the network. And so that was a direct contribution right there, was just that feedback we got, which also corresponded to our ridership evaluation results, which actually came a little bit later. But as we got the initial feedback from the community members of the survey and through the different meetings we had with elected officials, we saw that that was an important project to move forward.
Yes, sure. As also Carl mentioned, we this project is based part of SCA moving forward that actually approved by voters, and also from the beginning we started to involve all these local agencies, and they can be representative of their area and also their the elected officials. And we directly also contact with our resident through this kind of events, and also all the surveys. And we are always available. If I have all my contact information in the webpage, if anyone has any feedback, can directly contact me. And we are always welcome for feedback from our community, and we definitely value them, and we are going to apply them in our project. Like for instance, we have question about like what kind of improvement you want, which location do you want all the new investment to happen, and also asking about their travel behavior and travel preference, and we found for instance significant difference between their travel behavior. There were a good number of high percentage of the respondents that use driving every day, but they were actually willing to use a non-driving transportation mode, and it shows that the issue of availability of non-driving modes for residents. So all these tools we use to constantly receive the community feedback.
Thank you, Hamid. Last question. Sure. I know based on preliminary results that you guys showed there on one of the slides, you saw weekend and night service is one of the main things I believe the survey results had shown. Any idea on what that would look like or preliminary information on that?
Yeah, so that is an investment in STM moving forward, and is scheduled to be online in 2025. And so that will include running the current service later. Like I said, it ends about 9 o'clock on weekdays currently, but that would extend it to almost midnight on weekdays, and then Saturdays almost as long, and earlier in the morning. Well, it doesn't run at all on Saturday, so all Saturday service plus Sunday service. How often it comes during each of those different service windows still to be determined, but it would provide that connectivity again all the way from Liberty Lake to Spokane and Spokane Airport via Spokane Valley.
Wonderful. Perfect. Do we have, I think that's pretty much all the questions I had. If there's anyone with any other questions, if not, we'll go ahead, and we're getting right up to that hour. We'll go ahead and wrap it up, and we are recording this, so we'll go ahead and share this through both the city and here at the chamber. And then we'll also share the link as well. That way people can go ahead and have time to submit that public feedback, because I believe that is open until June 22nd, correct?
Yes, it looks like there is one question about the funding of the project. Yeah.
Yep. So Val, is there real estate acquisition and construction of the proposed project fully funded at this point?
So as I mentioned earlier, we have $14.5 million secured. One thing we will be working on as we go into the design phase is recalibrating cost estimates and budgets for this. And so that is yet to be done, just to see if our cost estimates need additional budget, which we would request from the STA Board of Directors. One thing also to note, there are phases like at the Green Acres location where we don't envision building that west on-ramp flyover in the near term. That would be something that comes at a later phase. So that would not be funded at all at this point.
Perfect. And one more question. What collaboration with WashDOT has there been, and has any conversation included lane expansion from State Line to the West Points?
Yeah, so we've collaborated. They've been on our technical advisory committee. We've also had various one-on-one meetings with them throughout this planning process. As far as lane expansions, we are looking at potentially as part of Argonne Road adding a new lane for transit only as part of one of the on-ramps. But as far as expanding the lane capacity east of say Barker Road area, I can't speak for WashDOT, but I know at this point I can confirm at least that they don't have any currently funded plans to expand the roadway east of Barker Road. And so any transit only elements that say that new park and ride would bring, that would be part of our project budget. And anything east of there, as I understand, is currently not on the plans.
Perfect. Thank you, Carl. Any last minute questions? Okay, I think we are all set. Thank you so much. Thank you both, Hamid and Carl, for joining us for this community conversation. And again, thank you to the City of Spokane for their partnership and Spokane Transit Authority. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us, and you guys have a great day.
Thank you all. Really appreciate it. Have a good day.
Have a good day.